Greetings and welcome to Risky Business, managing your risk in 5 minutes or less. My name is Edra Anderson and I'm Vice President of Risk Management and General Counsel for the San Antonio Board of Realtors. Today's topic is the Addendum for Sale of Other Property by Buyer, a form that is commonly referred to as the Contingency Addendum. I thought this form would be a great subject for us today because it is a popular form, yet frequently misunderstood. While we won't be able to get into each and every nuance relative to the Contingency Addendum in this forum, I'd like to answer a few questions for you and then encourage you to contact me directly with any others. Generally speaking, the Contingency Addendum is a TREC promulgated form to be used when a buyer's ability to perform under a purchase contract depends on the buyer's ability to sell her current home. One of the most common questions I receive about the form is by what date should the parties agree that the contingency be either satisfied or waived? This is one of those questions where the answer is really contained in the question. The parties can agree on whatever day they think is best, so long as it isn't after the closing date. From the buyer's perspective, however, the buyer wants the contingency to last as long as possible, whereas the seller would want that contingency time frame to be as short as possible. The bottom line, though, is that this is a negotiable item between the parties, and they should be realistic about the buyer's prospect for selling his existing house if they want this contract to close successfully. The second contingency addendum issue I hear about quite frequently has to do with the circumstance in which the seller receives interest from another serious buyer and wants to force the first buyer to either waive the contingency under their contract or terminate. There are several points that are raised by this occurrence. The first point is for the seller. Before the seller under a contingency contract is able to require the contingency buyer to do anything, the seller must have accepted a backup offer. It is not sufficient that another offer have been made or that others have expressed interest. There must actually be a backup contract in place before the seller is empowered by the contingency addendum. The second point is for both the contingency seller and the contingency buyer. When the seller has accepted a backup offer and wants to require the contingency buyer to either waive the contingency or terminate, there's a TAR form the seller should send to that buyer for the buyer to make her election between either waiving or terminating. Once the buyer receives this notice from the seller, the buyer makes their election to either waive or terminate using the exact same document that was provided by the seller. In other words, there's only one form document used by the contingency seller and buyer to give their respective notices back and forth. The third and final point I'd like to make is specifically for contingency buyers who have received notice from the seller that the seller has accepted a backup offer. Buyers who are considering waiving the contingency should be advised by their agent that if after waiving the contingency they're unable to perform under their current purchase agreement because they couldn't sell their current property, then the buyer will be in default and the seller will be empowered under the default paragraph of the contract. I hope these points have brought some clarity to you regarding the Addendum for Sale of Other Property by Buyer. It's actually a relatively straightforward form, but it's meant for situations which can conversely be quite complex. If you have any other questions about the form, please be sure to contact me at the board office. And don't forget, share your risky situations on the SABOR LinkedIn page. I do monitor that page and hope to see a topic that we can discuss on a future Risky Business. Until next time, here's wishing you more business and less risk. Take care.